Hello, class. In the past couple videos, I showed you how to set up elevations to be able to draw them, and I showed you a layer standard that you might choose to use when you're making them. In this video, I just want to talk a little bit about the basic rules of how you determine what layer, or really what line weight, lines in an elevation should be in AutoCAD. And again, if you already know these rules, you do not have to watch this video. This is definitely basic stuff that we've reviewed in many other classes before this one. But for those of you who might want a refresher and make sure you're doing it correctly, sure, go ahead and watch this video. Of course, anytime you're doing a drawing, the thing that you cut through is the thickest line. And by cut through, I mean, of course, any 2D drawing at some point in the world or universe you've sort of taken away some and you're looking at it in a plan. You just go about 4 feet up, take away the roof, and then look down. In elevation, it's might not be as clear. What are you taking away? I see the whole building, right? What you're actually taking away is the ground or the earth in front of the building. You have to stand in front of the building essentially to see it, and so that's your cut line, is through the ground. Any cut line is going to be the thickest line weight. And so we can see in this drawing here, I have it as magenta. And if you remember from my standard that I had shown in the last video, which I can put up briefly here, if you need to pause it, you can take a look in this video. But I have it set up so my thickest line weight is magenta, my lightest is red, and sort of the steps in between in that color plane in the AutoCAD layers is continually increases. So my cut line elevation's got one, it's this. Then there are a couple other rules we use when we're determining the sort of line weight in elevations. The first is edges. The outline of your building tends to be thicker than a thicker line weight than stuff that's sort of more internal. That's actually the important rule for elevations. I guess it's true for sections as well. And so you sort of want to highlight the object. So we can see in that dark blue or regular blue, I sometimes call cyan light blue, so my apologies, but this blue color, that's my next line weight down. We can see I've got the, if we know the edge of this house is actually fairly three-dimensional, so there's an edge. This really is a hard edge coming up here, and of course the roof purposely sticks out of both sides, so that creates a hard edge. I've got this element of the architecture here, which is the furthest forward, and this roof element right here. So I've decided in this case to really highlight all my edges because I felt the design of this house was about these steps in plane. It's the overall form of the shed roof as well as these little steps in plane. So I thought to highlight that I'd be a bit judicious in defining my exterior edges. Of course, inside all of that, I step down in line weights, which we'll get to in a second. Because, of course, the next major rule of determining line weights is things that are further away from you also step down in thickness. So we can see this fireplace chimney out here is actually quite deep in the plane. So that gets a yellow color in here, which is a very minor color in this diagram because it's further back, right? Now, yes, this plane of this house is technically a foot or two further back from this plane of the house, but it's minor. Again, those two planes are meant to play off of each other as similar, so I've left them the same line weight. So again, in summary, things you cut through are thickest. Things that are deeper in the plane, the things that get further away from that cut line, we get thinner and thinner line weights, but also if you have a surface or a set of surfaces, the edges are darker than the more internal elements of that. So we can see like this dark edge blue plane, but when I get to windows which are in the same plane, I step down. The window opening itself is the cyan line. That's the difference between what is essentially on the surface of the wall and what sort of gets pushed back for the window frame itself. And then the yellow here on the outside is trim. It's a minor element, so that's why it's stepped down in line weight, as well as the internal framing element itself on the inside of that cyan line, the inside yellow line right here where my cursor is, that is also just sort of at that plane, and so it gets the yellow line weight. And then the hatch itself, I usually tend to do pretty thin, so we can see all my hatches, the siding and the brick and so on and so forth, or just red at that final line weight. And oftentimes hatches are very thin. For architecture anyway like this, it's really, if my concept is about the form of the house, the materials might be played up less in this drawing, especially if it's going towards construction documentation or something of that matter for an elevation detail at this scale where you get into detailed drawings for more of those material choices. So ultimately though, I think it should be kept in mind that when you come to plan, I think there's very little wiggle room on what layers you use. And in sections, there's not much. But in elevations, I think there is a fair amount of wiggle room. Yes, the ground plane, that needs to be cut. Your outlines need to be the next darkest. But it was my interpretation to say this element was an edge in this plane because I wanted it. It was my perspective of the architecture, right? Arguably, I could have made this set back. This element here is set back further. I decided it to make it stronger to read as more of a front plane, but you might have chosen to say no, that's more like it's set back. Again, it's my interpretation of the architecture. You may have a different interpretation. So I'm not going to be, when I sort of go to grading these things, I'm not going to be going to the level where there is necessarily a right answer or a wrong answer, but I will be sort of looking holistically. Did you generally follow the rules, and were those rules applied consistently across all four elevations? And do they make sense, right? So keep that in mind. You don't have to use exactly what I've used. Just be consistent, be smart about it, and you'll sort of have it done. So I'm just going to show you this one elevation, sort of incomplete. If you happen to have this elevation, it's a freebie if you want to do it like myself, because you can sort of see how it all lays out. But for the other elevations and the other houses that I haven't not showing in this video, you just follow the same exact rules. It'll be good practice. Of course, if you are still confused even after this video about what layer certain objects should be on, you can come visit me anytime, and we can definitely go through it and show you how it lays out and what might be a good choice and why. So with that, I think this is the end of this quick little series on setting up elevations, but certainly come back for more videos in the future. Thank you.